For years, I secretly paid their mortgage. The day I stopped, they disowned me. They thought I'd come crawling back. They never imagined I'd call the bank and uncover their dirtiest secret. The silence in my Chicago apartment was a luxury I had purchased with 6 months of blissful, deafening quiet. It was a Tuesday night in early fall, the city lights painting a soft, impressionistic mural against my living room window. In my hand, I held a heavy glass tumbler, the amber of a good whiskey catching the light. On my laptop screen was an email confirmation for a weekend cabin rental in Michigan. My first real vacation in. I couldn't even remember how long. It wasn't just a trip, it was a declaration. A statement that my time, my money, and my life were finally, unequivocally, my own. For 32 years, my life had been a series of obligations, a tangled web of unspoken duties and emotional debts I was perpetually paying off. But for the last 184 days, I had been free. No pleading phone calls, no passive-aggressive texts, no sudden, manufactured emergencies that only my wallet could solve. I had severed the connection, and in the ensuing silence, I had begun to hear myself think for the first time. I was beginning to build a life, not just service one. In the corner of the room stood an old acoustic guitar, a Fender from the 70s. It was the only thing I'd brought with me from my childhood home that truly felt like it belonged to me. It was a relic from a version of myself I barely recognized anymore. A younger, lighter version before I'd learned that my primary role in my family was to be the load-bearing wall. The reliable one. The fixer. I took a slow sip of the whiskey, letting the warmth spread through my chest, and allowed myself a small, genuine smile. This was peace. It was fragile, I knew, but it was real. And then, my phone, which had been lying face down on the coffee table like a sleeping cat, lit up. The screen illuminated a name I hadn't seen in half a year. Dad. My heart didn't leap. It didn't pound. It just sank a slow, heavy descent into the pit of my stomach, like a stone dropped into a deep well. The peace wasn't just broken, it was violated. I knew, with the certainty of a man who has lived the same day 1,000 times, that this wasn't a social call. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a bill. I let the phone buzz once, twice. Then I picked it up. A single text message glowed on the screen. Why haven't you paid the mortgage? The question mark felt less like an inquiry and more like an accusation. The exclamation point was the twist of a knife. I read the words again, letting their sheer, unadulterated entitlement wash over me. No, hi, Caleb. No, hope you're doing well. Just a demand, wrapped in the guise of a question. The gnarled, familiar knot of resentment and weariness tightened in my gut. For a moment, I considered just deleting it, blocking the number, pretending it never happened. But that was the old Caleb. The Caleb who absorbed, who placated, who paid. The new Caleb, the one who was just starting to breathe, deserved better. He deserved an answer. My answer. My thumbs moved deliberately over the keyboard. Each letter was a small, cold piece of ice. Oh, I thought I wasn't welcome. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. I placed the phone face down on the table again, but I couldn't look away. I didn't have to. A second later, it began to vibrate. It didn't just buzz, it thrashed a furious, incessant rattling against the wood. A wild animal in a cage, woken from its slumber and realizing it was trapped. The storm had arrived right on schedule. The memory of that last day, 6 months ago, wasn't hazy. It was etched into my mind with the clarity of a trauma. It was a Sunday, which in my family's world meant the obligatory pilgrimage to the suburban Illinois house I had grown up in. The house I was still paying for. I remember the smell as I walked in. That familiar scent of pot roast and simmering resentment. My mother, Sharon, was at the dining table, her lips pressed into that thin, bloodless line that was the prelude to a verdict. My father, Richard, was hovering by the kitchen doorway, polishing a glass that was already clean, his face a carefully curated mask of neutrality. And on the sofa, of course, was my older brother, Leo. At 35, he was a master of a specific kind of inertia, lounging amidst a sea of cushions like a deposed monarch, scrolling idly through his phone. Caleb, my mother began, her voice devoid of any warmth. We need to talk. My own voice was tired before I even spoke. About what? My father chose that moment to step forward, the designated peacemaker whose role was always to smooth the path for my mother's demands. Caleb, we're a family, he started, the classic opening gambit. And we need to be realistic about things. Leo is finding his footing. You're stable. You're successful. He paused, letting the unsaid words hang in the air. Leo, without looking up from his phone, had the audacity to smirk. Come on, Cal. It's just money. You're swimming in it. The casualness of it, the sheer entitlement, made something in my chest tighten. This wasn't just about the mortgage anymore. I could feel it. My mother slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a credit card statement. Leo's name was at the top. The balance was a little over $15,000. He had some unexpected expenses, she said, as if describing a leaky faucet. A business opportunity that didn't pan out. I stared at the number. $15,000. That was more than the down payment on my first car. More than I had in my savings for the first 5 years of my working life. A business opportunity. I repeated, my voice flat. Before I could say more, a specific memory, sharp and bitter, surfaced. I was 20 years old. I'd spent 2 years restoring an old Schwinn racing bike with my grandfather before he passed away. It was my prized possession, a tangible link to him. That was the year Leo, after dropping out of college for the second time, discovered online poker. He lost his tuition money in a single weekend. I remember the look on my mother's face, the quiet panic in my father's eyes. So I sold the bike. I sold it to a collector for $2,000, every dollar a stab of loss, and gave him the money to cover Leo's mistake. Leo had clapped me on the back and promised, I'll pay you back, man. Every penny. That promise had evaporated into the same ether as all his others. The memory burned behind my eyes as I looked at the new bill on the table. This wasn't a one-time crisis. It was a life cycle. This is not a responsibility, I said, my voice dangerously low. This is a black hole. Don't you be so dramatic, my mother snapped, her voice rising. He's your brother. He has artistic sensibilities you can't possibly understand. I understand $15,000 of debt, I countered, and I understand who's being expected to pay for it. My father stepped in, his voice taking on a pleading tone. Caleb, please. We just need you to officially take over the mortgage payments, all of it, and help us clear this, just until Leo gets back on his feet. He's been getting back on his feet since I was in high school. I shot back. When does it end? That's when my mother stood up, her face flushed with fury. She saw my resistance not as a reasonable boundary, but as a personal betrayal. I'm sick of your attitude, she seethed. Sick of you coming in here, acting like you're better than us, judging your brother. I'm not judging him, I said, my own voice rising to match hers. I'm just done paying for him. Then you're done with us, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward the door. If you think you're too good for this family, if you're going to be so useless and so ungrateful, then you can get out. Get out, and don't you dare come back. The word useless struck me like a physical blow. My entire identity within that family was built on my utility. I was the reliable son, the financial bedrock, the fixer. To be called useless was to be told that my only value had been transactional, and I was now failing to complete the transaction. In that deafening moment, I looked at my father. I pleaded with my eyes for him to say something, anything, to be a father, to say, Sharon, that's enough. But he just looked down at the floor, polishing that same damn glass, his silence a roaring confirmation of his cowardice. I looked at Leo, who was now watching the scene with a bored, detached amusement. And in their faces, I saw my future if I stayed. A lifetime of servitude. Something inside me didn't just snap. It turned to ice. Okay, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a slammed door. I picked up my car keys from the counter, turned my back on the three of them, and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I just left. And as the front door clicked shut behind me, I felt the terrifying, exhilarating weight of a lifetime of chains falling away. Back in the present, my apartment felt like a command center under siege. My phone was the epicenter of the attack. The initial vibration had settled into a relentless rhythm of notifications, each one a digital missile launched from the family war room, 3 hours away. I picked it up. A cascade of messages flooded the screen. I read them one by one, not out of anxiety, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. First, Mom. Her texts were a masterclass in emotional escalation. Caleb, answer your phone. I cannot believe you're doing this to us. The bank just called your father. We're going to lose our home because of your spite. How can you be so cruel? After everything we have done for you. We raised you, we fed you, we loved you. And this is how you repay us? By making us homeless? The weaponized guilt was so familiar, so practiced. Every word was designed to paint me as a monster, a cold-hearted villain in the melodrama she directed and starred in. For years, it had worked. Tonight, it felt like reading a script with painfully obvious dialogue. Then, Dad, his approach was different. He was the good cop, the voice of feigned reason. Caleb, son, this is serious. Just call me. We can work this out. Your mother is very upset. You know how she gets. The classic deflection, blaming her emotions as if they were a weather pattern beyond his control. Please, just be the bigger person here. This isn't a game. We need your help. Don't throw away your family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. He called years of systematic financial exploitation a misunderstanding. The sheer audacity of it would have been funny if it weren't so deeply insulting. He wasn't appealing to my love. He was appealing to my lifelong conditioning to be the adult in the room, to clean up the mess. And finally, Leo. His texts were a pathetic blend of playground taunts and borrowed gravitas. Dude, what the hell? Mom is crying. Hope you're happy. You think you're teaching him a lesson, but you're just destroying everything. You better fix this. Are you really going to let your own parents get kicked out on the street? Just to prove a point? Some son you are. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The man who had not contributed a single dollar to the household in a decade was lecturing me on familial duty. He wasn't worried about them. He was worried about his couch, his free rent, his comfortable, responsibility-free existence. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen to pour another finger of whiskey. I wasn't angry anymore. The white-hot rage from that last day had cooled into a solid, heavy certainty. I felt a profound, weary sadness. This wasn't a family reaching out in crisis. This was an ecosystem whose host had just cut off the supply. They weren't mourning the loss of a son or a brother. They were panicking at the loss of function. An asset, an ATM. For so long, I had believed that my financial support was the bridge that kept me connected to them. I saw now that it was the bars of my own cage. I had paid them to keep me prisoner, and they had happily obliged. The phone buzzed again, a call this time. Mom. I let it ring, the sound echoing in the quiet apartment. It went to voicemail. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. Dad. I let that one go, too. Then another text from Leo. Answer the phone, you coward. I laughed. A real, actual laugh. It was a hollow, bitter sound, but it was a laugh nonetheless. Me a coward? I had been brave enough to work 2 jobs in college to avoid student loans. I had been brave enough to move to a new city alone and build a career from nothing. I had been brave enough to shoulder their burdens for more than a decade without complaint. And I was finally brave enough to stop. The cowardice wasn't in my apartment. It was huddled in their living room, staring at a future they had to pay for themselves, and they were terrified. I decided I wouldn't let them stew anymore. It was time to talk, but this time it would be on my terms. The next time Mom's number flashed on the screen, I answered. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the coffee table, creating a deliberate distance between myself and her voice. She didn't disappoint. There was no hello, just a shriek. Caleb, how dare you? Hello to you too, Mom. I said, my voice unervingly calm. I practiced this tone in my head 1,000 times. It was the voice I used with volatile clients at work. Detached, professional, unshakable. Don't you dare use that tone with me. You have to fix this. You have to call the bank and pay it. Now, fix what exactly? I asked, swirling the whiskey in my glass. Last I checked, I was following your instructions. You told me to get out and never come back. I got out. I haven't come back. Seems to me I'm being a very obedient son. There's a sputtering on the other end of the line. The logic of my statement was an impenetrable wall against her emotional onslaught. This isn't about that. This is our family home, the home you grew up in. You are destroying this family. This family, I said, the words tasting like ash, was destroyed long before I stopped paying its bills. I heard a sharp intake of breath, the prelude to another tirade, but I didn't give her the chance. I ended the call. The silence that followed was immense. My ears were ringing, and then a new feeling crept in, unwelcome and insidious. Doubt. The adrenaline from the confrontation receded, and in its place was a cold, creeping dread. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stood up and began to pace the length of my apartment, my own personal cage. Her voice, stripped of its rage, echoed in my head. Our family home, making us homeless. Did I go too far? The thought was a whisper, but it was powerful. She's still my mother. He's still my father. They're in their 60s. What if they actually end up on the street? Will that be on me? Will I be the monster she says I am? My hand twitched toward the phone. My thumb hovered over her contact name. I could call back. I could apologize. I could smooth it over just like I always did. I could transfer the money and buy another few months of their conditional, transactional affection. The path of least resistance was so tempting, a well-worn groove in my soul. My entire body screamed for me to just give in, to make the terrible feeling stop. Just as my thumb was about to press the screen, my phone lit up with another call. But this time, it was a different name. Marcus. I answered, my voice rougher than I intended. Hey, man. His voice was a welcome anchor of sanity. Let me guess. Your phone has achieved nuclear fusion by now. I let out a shaky breath. Something like that. And let me guess again, he continued, his tone kind but firm. You just got off the phone with one of them, and now you're wondering if you're the biggest asshole on planet Earth. His accuracy was so startling, it almost made me laugh. Is it that obvious? Caleb, I've known you for 10 years. I've watched them do this to you since we were interns. I've seen you cancel plans, sell things you loved, and put your own life on hold to bail them out of whatever mess Leo cooked up this time. You're not the asshole. You are the prisoner who just picked the lock. So don't you dare go back inside that cell. Don't you dare. His words were like a splash of cold water. He wasn't just validating my anger. He was validating my right to be free. He was reminding me that my perspective wasn't crazy. Thanks, man. I needed to hear that. Anytime, he said. But hey, one more thing. Knowing them, are you sure they're only late this month? With your family. The surface story is never the whole story. It's always just the part of the iceberg they can't hide anymore. The question hung in the air long after we hung up. It was a seed of suspicion planted in the fertile ground of my weariness. He was right. It was never this simple. They were too panicked, too desperate. This wasn't the smell of a small fire. This was the smell of a house that had been burning for a very, very long time. Marcus's question didn't just plant a seed. It flipped a switch in my brain. The hurt, emotional sun receded, and the forensic auditor took his place. This was a world I understood. A world of numbers, data, and hard, verifiable facts. A world where truth wasn't a matter of opinion or manipulation, but a result you could prove. I sat down at my desk, the whiskey forgotten. I opened my laptop, the familiar click of the keys, a comforting rhythm. I pulled up my online banking portal and began the tedious work of exporting years of transaction history. Then I opened a fresh spreadsheet. Columns, rows, formulas. This was my fortress of solitude. I meticulously logged every transfer I had ever made to my parents' joint account. The dates, the amounts. A grim financial biography of my 20s and early 30s. I could track the rhythm of their manufactured crises. A sudden car repair here, an unexpected medical bill there, and a mortgage payment a constant, draining presence month after month. Then I found the first anomaly. I cross-referenced the dates with my old email archives. 2 years ago, I found an email from my father. The subject line was simply house stuff. Hey son, it read. Bad news. The county raised property taxes again, pretty steep this time. If you could add an extra $200 to the monthly transfer, that should cover it. Thanks for everything you do. Dad. I remember the email. I remembered sighing, transferring the extra money without a second thought, because that's what I did. I fixed things. Now, I opened a new tab in my browser and navigated to the Cook County Property Tax Portal. I typed in my parents' address. The public records loaded in seconds. I scrolled through the payment history for the last 5 years. There had been no steep increase. In fact, the tax assessment had barely budged, rising only a negligible amount that wouldn't have required more than an extra $20 a month, if that. They had lied. It was a small lie in the grand scheme of things, but it was clean, provable, and utterly damning. It was the first solid crack in the foundation of their victimhood. My breath hitched. If they would lie about that, what else were they lying about? The auditor in me knew the next step. I had to go to the primary source. I had to eliminate the middlemen, my parents, from the equation entirely. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked up the number for their mortgage company. This felt different. This wasn't just setting a boundary. This was an act of investigation. I was crossing a line, and I knew there was no going back. I dialed the number. The hold music was tinny and awful. I listened to it for what felt like an eternity, my own heartbeat a frantic counter-rhythm. Finally, a polite, professional voice answered. "Thank you for calling Penwood Mortgage. My name is Brenda. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath, marshaling the calm, professional tone I had used with my mother. "Hi, Brenda. My name is Caleb Wright. I've been helping my parents, Richard and Sharon Wright, with their mortgage payments. I just wanted to check on the status of their account." I gave her the address and account number, which I still knew by heart. "One moment, sir." The hold music returned. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, at the years of my life converted into dollar signs. I had poured a small fortune into that house. Brenda's voice came back on the line. Her tone had changed slightly. It was still professional, but now tinged with a careful, practiced neutrality. "Okay, sir, I have the account information here." She paused. "Sir, I see that regular payments on this account ceased some time ago." "Some time ago?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "What do you mean?" "I stopped sending the money this year." Another pause. I could hear the faint click of her keyboard. "Sir," she said, and the word was heavy with meaning. "This account has been in delinquency for 7 months. We have sent multiple notices to the address on file. The property is currently in the beginning stages of foreclosure proceedings." 7 months. The words echoed in the silent apartment. Not 1 month. Not 2. 7. They had been taking my money, my full, faithful mortgage payment, every single month for more than half a year, and they hadn't been paying the bill. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. This wasn't mismanagement. This wasn't a mistake. This was a long-term, calculated deception. This was theft. "Thank you, Brenda," I managed to say, my voice a croak. "You've been very helpful." I hung up the phone. I didn't move. I just stared at my screen at the rows and rows of my own money and felt a rage so pure and so cold it felt like swallowing ice. The game had changed. This was no longer about a family dispute. This was about a crime, and I knew exactly who the star witness was. The rage wasn't a hot, blinding flash. It was a cold, clarifying force. It burned away all the lingering traces of doubt, guilt, and misplaced familial duty. All that was left was the hard, sharp edge of betrayal. I knew I couldn't call my parents yet. A confrontation with them would be a hurricane of denial, blame-shifting, and theatrical hysterics. I needed leverage. I needed a confession. And I knew exactly which weak link in the chain to press. I scrolled through my contacts and hit the call button next to Leo's name. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with a smug, unearned authority. Finally decided to grow up and face the music. "Huh," he started. I cut him off. My voice was devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of an auditor stating an irrefutable fact. 7 months, Leo. Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry, what?" He stammered, his bravado evaporating instantly. "I just got off the phone with the mortgage company," I said, letting each word land with its full weight. "They haven't received a full payment in 7 months. Foreclosure proceedings have started. Now, I know for a fact that I sent the money to Mom and Dad's account every single one of those months. So I'm going to ask you one time, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Where did my money go?" The silence that followed was profound. I could hear his shallow, panicked breathing. I could picture him perfectly, pacing the worn-out carpet in their living room, running a hand through his hair, his face pale with the terror of being caught. I don't know what you're talking about. He finally managed, but his voice was thin and reedy. Dad handles the money. You know that. Don't, I said, my voice dropping lower. Don't you dare lie to me right now, Leo. This isn't one of your little schemes where I clean up the mess and everyone forgets about it. This is serious. I know about the $15,000 credit card debt. I know about the business opportunity. I'm not stupid. So where is it? He started to sputter, a jumble of half-formed denials and deflections. It was an investment, Dad thought. It was supposed to be a sure thing. And there it was. The crack. I pressed harder. What was a sure thing, Leo? I asked, my voice still eerily calm. What investment was more important than keeping a roof over your own heads? My money. Tell me. That's when he broke. The man-child behind the mask finally came out, his voice cracking, laced with the pathetic whine of a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It was crypto, he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in a rush. This guy I know, he had a can't-miss coin. It was going to the moon. Everyone was getting rich. I told Mom and Dad, if they just gave me the capital, I could triple it in a few months. I could pay off everything. The mortgage, the cards, everything. I was going to pay you back. I was going to be the one to fix things for a change. His voice was filled with a desperate, self-pitying sincerity. He actually believed it. He believed he was the hero of this story, the visionary who had a plan to save them all, if only reality hadn't gotten in the way. The anger inside me flickered and died, replaced by something far worse, pity. A deep, profound, and utterly exhausting pity. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a conniving mastermind. He was just a void. A 35-year-old child who had been so coddled and protected from the consequences of his own actions that he had never developed a moral spine. He had taken the money I had worked for, the long hours, the missed weekends, the sacrificed vacations, and he had thrown into a digital wishing well, and he was genuinely shocked that it had all disappeared. So the money's gone, I stated. It wasn't a question. I thought it would come back up, he pleaded. Everyone said it was just a dip. I was done. I had my confession. The weak link had not only broken, he had disintegrated. You didn't just lose money, Leo, I said, my voice flat and final. You made a choice. Mom and Dad made a choice. You all chose a fantasy over reality. And now, reality is at the door. I hung up before he could respond, leaving him alone with the wreckage he had created. Now it was time to talk to the architects of the disaster. With Leo's confession secured, I had all the facts on my side. There were no more gray areas, no more room for their emotional manipulation to take root. There was only the cold, hard truth. I dialed my father's number and put the phone on speaker. He answered immediately, his voice tense. Caleb, I need you to put Mom on the phone, I said. My tone was non-negotiable. I want you both to hear this. I heard some muffled shuffling and my mother's agitated voice in the background. A moment later, she spoke, her voice sharp with suspicion. What is it, Caleb? I took a breath. I didn't raise my voice. I presented my findings like I was in a boardroom, delivering the results of an audit that had uncovered massive fraud. I just concluded a very illuminating phone call with Leo. I began, which followed an equally illuminating call with Penwood Mortgage. So let's all get on the same page. Let's talk about the 7 months of delinquent payments. Let's talk about the foreclosure notice. And let's talk about the can't-miss crypto investment. Dead silence. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I had taken away their script, their narrative of the wronged parents, and the ungrateful son. All they were left with was the stark, ugly reality of their actions. It was my mother who broke the silence. But it wasn't with rage, not at first. It was with a raw, panicked desperation that was almost more damning. We were going to be on the street. Caleb, she cried, her voice cracking. Your brother. He had a plan. We had to support him. He's our son. What were we supposed to do? Just watch him fail. You were supposed to be parents, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses. You were supposed to pay your bills. You were supposed to tell the truth. And he is not your only son, though it seems you've forgotten that for the past 30 years. My father finally found his voice, and he immediately fell back into his lifelong role as the enabler, the emotional governor. Now is not the time for blame, son. he said, his tone placating. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. We need to focus on a solution. That word, solution, and the way he said it, as if this were a problem for us to solve, finally broke my composure. A mistake, I repeated, my voice rising with a dangerous edge. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is buying the wrong kind of milk. Systematically lying for 7 months, stealing the money I sent you in good faith, and gambling it away on your 35-year-old son's fantasy is not a mistake. It is a profound and absolute betrayal. I turned my attention to my father, and the words I had swallowed for a lifetime came pouring out. And you, I have waited my entire life for you to be a father to me. I thought if I was good enough, responsible enough, successful enough, that one day you would look at me and say, I'm proud of you, son. But I see now you don't have it in you. Your job wasn't to be a father to me. It was to manage your wife's moods and enable your son's failures. Your silence, all these years, has been the loudest message of all. You're a coward. A choked sob came from my mother's end. How can you be so hateful? Hateful. I laughed. A sharp, humorless bark. You want to see hateful? Hateful is looking at your 2 sons and deciding one is a golden child to be endlessly funded and the other is a workhorse to be endlessly ridden. Hateful is demanding loyalty from son you've shown none to. You didn't just betray me. You squander my respect. You squander my love. And you did it all for him. There was nothing left to say. The truth had been laid bare, and it was ugly and irreparable. Here is the solution, I said, my voice returning to an icy calm. You will sell the house. Leo will get a job. You will figure out how to live within your means. I don't care how you do it, but my involvement, my money, and my life are no longer a part of your equation. We are done. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't want to hear the tears or the rage or the pathetic last-ditch pleas. I ended the call, and with it, I ended a lifetime of servitude. The silence that filled my apartment this time wasn't empty. It was clean. That night, sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the day's conversations on a relentless loop. The anger had subsided, leaving behind the hollow, aching exhaustion of a battle won at a terrible cost. I had won my freedom, but the price was the final, official death of the idea of family I had clung to for so long. Just as I was drifting into a shallow, restless sleep, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was one of them calling from a borrowed phone. But something made me answer. Hello. A woman's voice, warm and familiar, though I hadn't heard it in years. Caleb, it's your Aunt Carol, my father's sister. She lived in Oregon and had always been a peripheral figure in my life, a Christmas card and a biannual phone call. Aunt Carol, I said, sitting up, my mind racing. How did you? I got a hysterical call from your mother an hour ago, she said, cutting through my confusion. And a rambling, incoherent one from your father before that. I'm not calling to get your side of the story. I've known their sides for 40 years. I know the whole damn story. I waited, unsure what to say. Listen to me, Caleb, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I'm not calling to defend them. God knows, there's no defense for what they've done to you over the years. I'm calling to check on you. I can only imagine what this is costing you, what it takes to finally stand up for yourself against all that. Her words were so unexpected, so radically different from every other family communication I'd ever had that I felt a knot of emotion tighten in my throat. She wasn't taking sides. She was on my side. It's been a long day, I managed to say. I'm sure it has, she said softly. I just want you to hear this from someone in this family, just once. You are a good man, Caleb. You have been a better son than they ever deserved. You have every right to your anger, every right to your peace, and every right to your own life. Please don't ever let them make you doubt that. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. It was a simple validation, a basic acknowledgement of my reality, but it felt like a lifeline. It was the conversation I had always wanted to have with my own parents. A moment of unconditional support. It didn't erase the years of damage, but it was a balm on a fresh wound. It was a voice from the wreckage, telling me I wasn't alone. Thank you, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice thick. You have no idea how much that means. You just take care of yourself, honey, she said. That's your only job now. We said our goodbyes and hung up. I lay back down, and for the first time all night, the frantic energy in my mind began to quiet. A single act of kindness hadn't fixed everything, but it had given me something I desperately needed. Proof that the poison that ran through my parents didn't have to infect the entire tree. The weeks following the reckoning were strangely quiet. I blocked my parents' and brother's numbers. I knew they were trying to reach me through blocked calls and emails sent to my spam folder, but I refused to look. My silence was no longer a retreat. It was a fortress wall, and I was finally in command of the gates. Life fell into a new rhythm. The constant low-grade anxiety that had been the background music of my life for years began to fade. I slept better. Food tasted better. I went on my weekend trip to Michigan and sat by a lake, doing nothing but reading a book and listening to the wind in the trees. It was glorious. About 2 months after the final call, an email slipped through my filters. It was from my father. The subject line was just my name. Caleb. My finger hovered over the delete button, but a morbid curiosity won out. I opened it. The email was short, stripped of all the usual emotional rhetoric. It was the sterile communication of a man who knew he had no leverage left. We have accepted an offer on the house. A developer bought the lot. We close in 30 days. We will be moving to a small apartment in Joliet. I know this is not what you want to hear, but I'm sorry for how things turned out. Dad, I read it twice. The apology was there, the 2 words I'd craved for years. I am sorry. But seeing them now, they felt hollow, weightless. It was an apology for the outcome, not for the actions. It was the sorry of a man who got caught, not the sorry of a man who understood the depth of the wound he had inflicted. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I just felt nothing. It was a message from a stranger about a property I no longer had any connection to. I deleted the email and emptied the trash. A few weeks after that, as I was leaving work, a text came in from a number I didn't recognize at first. It was from Mr. Henderson, my parents' old neighbor, a kind retiree whose lawn I used to mow as a teenager. Caleb, son, just saw the moving trucks at your folks' place today. Sad to see them go. Your brother was making quite a scene, yelling at the movers. Something's never changed, I guess. Hope you're well. I stared at the message. It was a final, pathetic glimpse into the world I had escaped. Leo, unable to handle the slightest bit of adversity, lashing out at the people paid to move the furniture he likely never lifted a finger to help with. And my parents, presumably, standing by and watching, just as they always did. I typed back a simple reply. I am very well, Mr. Henderson. Thank you for thinking of me. And I was, for the first time, standing on a busy Chicago street, surrounded by the noise and energy of my own life. I realized the statement was completely, unequivocally true. I was well. The dust had settled, and I was still standing. A full year had passed since I walked out that door. The seasons had turned, and so had the landscape of my life. The quiet in my apartment was no longer a novelty. It was the norm. It was a peace I had fought for, and now protected fiercely. The money that used to flow into the black hole of my family's finances was now being redirected. It was building something new, something for me. I had a healthy investment portfolio. I had a down payment fund for my own condo slowly, but surely growing. But the most significant change wasn't in my bank account. It was in my hands. On Saturdays, I didn't look at spreadsheets or audit reports. I went to a shared woodworking space in an old industrial building by the river. The air inside smelled of sawdust and varnish and honest labor. Today, I was running my hand over the surface of a coffee table I was building. It was made of solid walnut, the grain a beautiful, complex pattern. It was nearly finished. It was sturdy. It was real. The work was tactile, creative, and demanding in a way my job wasn't. It required patience and precision. Every cut had to be exact, every joint seamless. There were no shortcuts. You couldn't lie to a piece of wood. It was either true and level, or it was not. It was the perfect antidote to a lifetime of emotional ambiguity and deceit. As I sanded the edges smooth, I thought about the wreckage of the past year. I realized the freedom I had found wasn't a loud, triumphant party. It was a quiet, internal shift. It was the solemn acceptance that some people are emotional black holes, and you cannot set yourself on fire to keep them warm. It was the heartbreaking but necessary act of grieving for a family I wished I had, rather than continuing to sacrifice myself for the one I actually did. I wasn't just free from them anymore. I was free to be myself. I was no longer the fixer. I was no longer the ATM. I was no longer the responsible son who silently carried the weight of everyone else's bad decisions. I was just Caleb, a man who liked the smell of sawdust, the taste of good whiskey, and the quiet satisfaction of building something with his own two hands. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, wiping the dust from my hands onto my jeans. It was a picture message from Marcus. He was standing at the top of a hiking trail, grinning, the woods sprawling out behind him. The caption read, "Starve Rock next weekend? You're turned to buy the post-hike beer." A genuine smile spread across my face. A real one, reaching all the way to my eyes. This was my family now. The one I had chosen. The one built on mutual respect, laughter, and showing up for each other in ways that didn't come with an itemized bill. I typed back, "You're on. But I'm driving. Your car smells like wet dog." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and turned my attention back to the table. I picked up a soft cloth to apply the first coat of oil. As the rich, dark liquid soaked into the wood, bringing out the depth and beauty of the grain, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The table was almost done. It was strong. It would last. And it was mine. I was building my life, one true, solid piece at a time.